Okay, so this is a really interesting one because I think a lot of people will know what FTP means, what functional threshold power stands for. They may even know how to test for it. But what I don't get is a sense that people fully understand exactly what feeds into their functional threshold power and what it really represents in the round. So just to start off by patronising the hell out of you, just going to explain what FTP or functional threshold power means. So basically, it's an attempt to put a power number on your aerobic ceiling. So the point at which you go from working largely aerobically, so you're consuming enough oxygen in order to buffer the concentration of hydrogen ions and lactate in your muscles. You shift from that point to working more and more in the absence of oxygen. Okay, so that's the kind of metabolic change that we're trying to pinpoint. And it's important to note that the power number that we put on in reality, that threshold changes day to day by a few watts or what have you. And so yeah, really we're talking about a power range rather than one specific number. And as I say, day to day that can change either because you're fatigued or you've not slept well, or depending on how well fueled you are, how stressed you are, etc., etc. So yeah, just as a starting point, your FTP, we give it a solid number, but in reality, it's actually more of a range. So that's roughly what FTP is. You might have come across a few of the tests for it. So the more common ones, you've got things like the ramp test, where your wattage increases sort of by 6 to 10 watts each time until you just can't pedal anymore. You've got the normal 20-minute FTP test, where you just go as hard as you can for 20 minutes, and then you multiply your average power by 0.95, and that effectively extrapolates to predict what your power would be were you to ride a full hour, effectively. Okay, or you can do, as we do, the full spectrum performance test, so where you test for all your anaerobic power durations, and then you do the 20-minute test at the end. And so the idea being is that you exhaust your anaerobic system, so that 20 minutes is a pure measurement of your aerobic fitness. So you haven't got your fast twitch muscle fibers, etc., lending a hand when you get there. So those are some of the tests that you can use. Ultimately, they all have their little flaws and their little idiosyncrasies. And so a lot of stock is put in what your FTP is, and it can be a little bit of a badge of honour. One of the things that I don't think people fully understand is kind of what actually feeds into that number. So you've got, I would say, two main factors. So you've got the strength element. So just your physical ability to produce more power is obviously going to contribute to raising that FTP. But the element that people don't necessarily appreciate the effect of wholly, I don't believe, is the aerobic fitness element of it. Okay, so to kind of put it into context, we've just gone through a very miserable winter during this COVID pandemic. And actually, people might have been able to train more consistently, probably indoors, doing structured turbo sessions. And that's fantastic for building that strength element, that high intensity conditioning element. However, because the weather has been so dreadful and exercise restrictions, etc., chances are you might not have been able to get out and do your long base mileage as consistently as you would have liked. And that is perhaps why a lot of people during this time haven't seen their FTP figures increase as much as they would like. And it comes down to the fact that they don't have that aerobic, low intensity base mileage underpinning to all the hard work that they're perhaps doing midweek during some of RIAK Online's turbo sessions, for instance. So that is kind of the key message of this video, is that if you really want to improve your FTP, by all means do all the structured training within reason and within balance, but you have to be improving that aerobic fitness as well. Okay, an important thing to note about that is it doesn't have to be done in one go. You don't have to just go for ever increasing long endurance rides on a Sunday morning. What it means is you need to kind of increase your total weekly volume, and you can do that by peppering your week with shorter endurance-based rides. So 1-2 hours at low intensity, just to increase the frequency and the total volume of that lower intensity endurance work. All right, so to give yourself a little bit of a gauge, generally speaking, you want to apply the 80-20 rule, which in a nutshell just means that 80% of your total volume should be at a low intensity, and then only 20% of your total volume should be that high intensity supra threshold work. Okay, and you just apply that to your training week. So if you've got a 10-hour training week, 8 hours cumulatively over the course of that week should roughly be low intensity endurance work, and then only 20% of it should be that higher intensity threshold or super threshold focus work. Okay, so hopefully a good little pointer as to why your FTP might not be increasing as fast as you would like. Comes down to being able to back up that strength with the aerobic fitness. So hopefully that will take some of the pain out of those numbers not shooting up as fast as you may like.